Hi, welcome to my channel Field and Seam. My name is Joan, and today I'm going to teach you how to upholster a new cushion cover to refresh your chair. Let's go! This is the cushion we'll be recovering today. First thing I do when I get a new project is I get the measurements of the cushion. So to do this, I'm going to use a tape measure, a flexible tape measure, and I'm going to measure the center of the cushion from the piping line to the other piping line. As you'll see, it measures approximately 22 inches across. I'll also measure at the top and bottom corner. And those also are measuring 22 inches. So I'm going to write down my dimensions on a piece of paper. And I have 22 inches wide, and now let's measure the height. So again, from the bottom of the piping to the bottom of the cushion. And this is approximately 19.5 inches. Let's measure the corners. 19.5. And 19.5. So I'm confident that is a good measurement for this cushion, because it's going to be going back on the chair that it just came from. Okay, so after I've gotten my measurements, it's time to cut out our new fabric and measure that out. So I'm just going to set the cushion aside. And you'll notice for the measurements I used my tape measure. However, when we lay out the fabric, we are going to use a yardstick because we can get a little bit more of accurate measurement with that for the new fabric. And this is the fabric that the client has chosen. It's an upholstery grade fabric, and it looks like it has a textured weave, which is very nice. Now, when I measure out my fabric, first I look for any flaws. And we also want to pay attention to the direction of the fabric if it's directional. This fabric, the weave predominantly is traveling side to side from left to right as we unroll the fabric towards us. Here's a close-up of the fabric. It should look very nice on our cushion. Okay, so this area of the fabric looks good. I don't see any flaws. Flaws would be a run in the fabric. Perhaps there is a mismatch of the pattern or a line, for example. But this one looks great. So, as you will notice on our cushion, the stripes are running top to bottom. So I'm going to continue that with our new fabric. Alright, so when I actually mark the new fabric, I mark the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to turn this over, and I'm going to make sure that our predominant pattern is running up and down. As I'm standing this direction, it is. And I'm going to bring it to the edge of the island here. Now, you'll want to remember that we need a seam allowance for our cushion. And a standard seam allowance is 1/2 inch on each side. So we are going to make a total of a 1 inch addition to our measurements, as you might recall. So our measurements were 22 wide by 19.5 tall. So I'm going to cut out my piece of fabric 23 inches wide and 20.5 inches tall, allowing for a 1/2 inch each side of seam allowance. I also like to make sure that the fabric from the store or the company you order it from has a straight cut at the edge, because that will really mess up your pattern, especially if it has a bunch of lines or flowers, etc. So I'm just going to take a look here, and I'm going to make a straight mark on the fabric as my beginning point, so I know this edge will be straight, because I don't want my lines all of a sudden to go sideways. Okay, here I go. So I'm just going to mark a straight line, and my measuring stick, of course, is 36 inches. So right now that's just what I'm going to do. Here I go. So this is a ballpoint pen. I recommend using ballpoint pen with regular ink because it can be easily removed with an ink remover or also rubbing alcohol, because sometimes the ink will transfer to the other side of the fabric. So you want to use either a fabric marking pen or an ink pen where you can easily remove any unwanted ink. Okay, and my line along the bottom is right by the selvage, and so that is straight. So that is where I'm going to do my 23 inches wide, and I'm going to come up 20.5 inches tall. So I'll go ahead and do that using my straight yardstick. At the edge of the fabric here is 23.5 inches. I'll make a mark and draw a line along the straight selvage. Just like that. Then I'm going to go along the straight edge line that I drew on the left of the fabric, and again I'm going to mark 23.5 inches. And I'm going to do that to the height of the cushion, which you remember is 20.5 inches. It's looking good. Okay, so I'm going to come now to this line, again at 20.5 inches, and I'm going to draw a straight line between the dots. And it should be right along the line of this textured fabric. And it's pretty close. So now I'm going to work my way across the fabric, measuring out 20.5 inches from the bottom of the selvage here. And we're going to go across. Here we go. I started freelance upholstery 5 years ago. I had recently had my first child, a son, and he was about 11 months old when I began working as a freelance upholsterer. And I stopped in at an upholstery shop that was in our neighborhood when they were having a garage sale. And I let them know that I had done some upholstery in the past, and they were looking for some help. And so I said, well, I can do upholstery from my garage at home. And they gave me a chance, and here I am 5 years later, still working for the same upholstery shop. Alright, so now I've got my first piece of my new cushion cover. Again, I'm going to make another cushion cover. Sometimes what I like to do is cut this cover piece out and flip it over so it gets an exact match with my next piece, which will be either the top or the bottom of the cushion cover. So I'm going to go do that now. Being careful to cut along the line, I cut out my fabric. Now I'll trim along the selvage and the straight line. And if you're ever concerned that you won't have enough fabric for a project, it is wise to measure out all of your pieces and mark them all out before cutting. That way if you need to change directions or make a few changes, you have that flexibility to do so. This one, however, we should have plenty of fabric, and so I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. Okay, one more cut along this straight line that we created at the beginning. Great! And here we have our first piece of fabric. As you can see, our predominant line is going vertical, and so that's looking great. And so now, when I cut my second piece, I'm going to scoop my fabric down. And I'm going to label what is going to be the top of my cushion cover. And I'm going to use this edge. This is on the back side. I'm just writing the word top. Again, I'm going to fold it over. So now this side is going to be the top, and the side underneath, which is still on the wrong side, is going to be the bottom. This way, I won't have any crazy corners when I'm sewing the new cover together. Again, I'm going to take my straight edge and I'm going to follow the line of the fabric. You could also just cut it out at this point, but I like to have a nice straight line that I can follow and not worry about my fabric slipping around as I'm cutting it. Okay, now we'll set this aside. Again, we're going to mark which part of this new piece of fabric is the top to match the first piece. Again, I'm just writing the words top. And now I will go ahead and cut it out. All right, so now I have two matching pieces for the front and the back of my new cushion cover. Next, we're going to cut out the piping, the boxing, and the zipper. So first, let's measure. For this cushion, again, we measure from the inside of the boxing. It's 4 inches deep. Again, I'm going to measure this side just to make sure it's also 4 inches, and it is. Great, and that would mean our zipper is also 4 inches. And I'll show you a trick later about that. Okay, so now let's measure how long our boxing needs to be. And you'll also notice that on this boxing the stripe turns because the fabric has turned. So we're going to do that too because it will match the top and also the bottom of the zipper. All right, so starting from this corner, I give myself 2 inches of allowance because you never want to have too little boxing. We're just going to go around the corner and keep going. You don't want to pull too tight because you don't want to cut too little. And again, I'm going to go 2 inches over, and that equals 66 inches. So I need boxing that is 66 inches long. And remember, we need a 1/2 inch seam allowance on each side. So we're going to add 4 inches, the finished boxing, plus 1 inch equals 5. So on our cut list, we're going to need to do a piece of boxing 5 inches wide by 66 inches long. Now, again, I said there was a trick for the zipper. Okay, so let's measure the zipper end, and it should come out to 22 inches. Yes, 22 inches. So what I'm going to do is add my 1 inch seam allowance, so 23, that makes it 23. And instead of adding just a 1/2 inch on each side for the seam allowance, we also need to add a 1/2 inch for the fold over flap where the zipper will then go in between. So I need to add 2 inches, and that makes it come to 23 inches long by 6 inches tall. And you remember our boxing's 5 inches, but we needed an extra inch for the zipper, so it's 6 inches for the zipper. So now I have my cut list, and I'll measure and cut those out. Again, I'm going to slide my fabric down. And begin measuring. So in my opinion, upholstery is like a big puzzle. You take apart all of the pieces and you simply put it back as you would a jigsaw puzzle. Okay, so I'm going to begin with my first piece here. We're going to do the boxing, which is 66 inches long by 5 inches deep. Again, I'm going to work from the selvage edge of my fabric. I'm going to roll out a little bit extra for myself. And working from the straight edge of the selvage piece, I'm going to measure down 5 inches until I get 66 inches long. And mark it with my pen. Mark it with my pen. Again, the pattern on this boxing is vertical because that will match the top and bottom of our cushion. But because we turn the corner at the sides, it will go a different direction at the sides, but that's okay. Okay, and then I'm going to measure out 66 inches. So I need a yardstick plus 30 additional inches. Again, I'm just connecting my dots that were made at 5 inches apart. Making sure there's no flaws at the front of my fabric. Now you may ask why I named my channel Field and Seam. And that is because my maiden name is Engström, and it's Swedish. And the name Engström means field and stream. And I am inspired by my father, who is a woodworker and also did some upholstery in high school that I didn't know about until just last year. So I get my talent from him. And his father always encouraged him to be creative. So that is what I strive for here at Fieldandseam Upholstery. I'm located in Washington State. So here I have my boxing. I'm going to measure out my zipper and then I'll cut out both of those. Don't forget, we need to add a half inch for each side of the zipper. So we do our boxing, which is 4 inches, plus 2 inches for the zipper. And that was going to be 22 inches long, but I'm adding an inch for my seam allowance. I'm just going to go off of my 5-inch mark. And I'm going to go down 6 inches and make my other mark for my zipper. It's also smart because you're going to be cutting your zipper in half lengthwise to mark the halfway point, which for me is 3 inches. Just saves you some measuring in the end. So my zipper is 6 inches by 23 inches. So that should do it. Let's take a look. Yep. 23 inches is right here. I'm going to follow my 6-inch dot line, make my new line, come up and follow my 3-inch dot line, which is where I'm going to cut the zipper in half. Mark it at 23 inches. So you'll remember from our dimensions that finished cushion is 22 inches wide by 19.5 inches tall. So we're going to need to do 2 pieces of piping, and it's going to be 22 times 2, which is 44, and let's round up to 20 for the sides, and that's 40. So I'm going to need to cut out 2 pieces of piping that are 84 inches long. Let's do it. The best way to measure out your piping width is to use the width of your yardstick. Okay, so I'm going for 84 inches long, and I need 2, 1 for the top, 1 for the bottom of the cushion. So these are easy because you can just mark out along the width of the yardstick. It doesn't need to be exact, but if this is done correctly, it should give you a 1/2-inch seam allowance at the end of your piping, which I'll show once we make it to the sewing machine. So here I have 72 inches. And I need 84, so I need 12 more inches. Always give yourself a couple of extra inches with the piping is what I say, because when we go ahead and close the piping around the piping cord, we loop it over on itself. So it's nice to have just a little extra. Okay, so there's 1. And I'm going to go ahead and do 2 and cut those out, and then we'll go to the sewing machine. So now at my sewing machine, about a year ago I purchased the Sailrite Fabricator sewing machine, and it's been great. So I'm going to tuck my welt cord inside of my piping strip, which again is about 1.5 inches wide, which is the width of the yardstick. Go ahead and squeeze it in there and put it under the presser foot. This is a special presser foot for piping from the Sailrite sewing machine company. And the particular one that I'm using is 3/16, which is just slightly larger than 5/32, the size of our piping cord. So again, it's just like a sandwich. You want to squeeze the edge of your piping, which should go close to the 1/2-inch edge line, and pull your strings back, and let's go. You want to make sure that you keep the piping cord in tight as you can as you sew along. So the foot has a gap underneath where the piping cord fits. We're going to go ahead and sew these 84 inches My stitch length on the Fabricator is at about 3.5. We're just going to keep on going here. My seam allowance on the piping is a little bit under 1/2 inch, but it will be okay. We can still make it work. If it's a little bit over 1/2 inch, I recommend trimming it to be 1/2 inch, because then we can line up the seam allowance on the cushion cover pieces with the edge of the fabric of the piping and the edge of the cushion cover. That's coming up next. So I'm just sewing along. I decided to go with a white thread since the predominant pattern in this fabric is a white colored material. I could have also chosen light gray, but I had white on hand. Again, Amazon has been handy to buy upholstery threads, especially as they're becoming harder to find in the store in specific colors. Okay, we're almost at the end of the piping. And I always allow myself a little bit extra piping, is why we have extra piping without the fabric. Trim the thread. And there you can see we have a nice tight seam along the edge of the piping. So I'll go ahead and do that now to the second piece, which is for the bottom of the cushion cover. So again, we get our piping strip, our piping cord, tuck it in the middle, tuck it under the piping foot on your sewing machine. Some people, if they do not have an industrial sewing machine, will also use the edge of their zipper foot. And that's what I did for a while before I bought an industrial machine. Okay, here we go. Always make sure to tuck it in nice and close so we get an even piping cord. And it's not lumpy and bumpy. And this is Potato, our shop cat. He's 1 year old and the cutest little orange tabby, but he does like to help me sew. And he likes to pull on the thread while I'm sewing. Oh, Potato. So again, I had marked the top of my cushion cover of the back. So I'm going to begin my piping at the bottom because you don't want the seam where you join the piping to be at the top and front and center of your cushion. Again, I'm going to bring my piping strip about the middle portion. Here we go. Slide it under the piping foot or along the zipper foot if you don't have a piping foot. And hold on to my strings, and here we go. Don't forget to stop about a 1/2 inch from the edge. Do your relief cut and turn the corner. Press our foot down. Here we go. staying at a 1/2 inch from the edge. Whoops, said that too soon. But we can always go back and correct if we get offline. My relief cuts, turn the corner, drop the presser foot and go. This fabric is definitely beginning to shred. I find that each project presents its own set of problems, whether the fabric is stretchy or slippery. Whoops, I forgot to put my presser foot down. You're most likely going to run into some sort of tricky problem as you go along sewing your project. But don't worry, most problems can be solved. Okay, we're coming up to our last corner. I'm going to do my relief cut, turn the corner, and finish up this piping. Okay, again we're going to stop. I'm coming from the other direction with my piping, so I'm going to trim this excess piping, pull back the piping cover just a bit so you see where you can line up your piping cord. We will trim the top piping cord to match the other edge. Grab your piece of Scotch tape, wrap it around, and connect them, just like that. Okay, once you have it taped, put your piping cover back around, make a small fold, tuck this underneath, bring this around. You want it to lie very flat and keep in line with the 1/2 inch seam allowance and sew. Sometimes the bottom half of this piping foot gets caught on lumps and thicker portions of fabric, so that's why I took a quick pause there to make sure my foot could go over the hump where we're connecting the piping, where we did that little fold. It creates a little bit of an extra bump right there. Okay, so now that we have done, both of our pipings have been sewn on to the tops and the bottoms of the covers, it's time to add the boxing. So to add the boxing, we are going to put right sides together and we are going to start at the bottom corner of our cushion cover. And remember to leave a 1/2 inch at the bottom for your seam allowance, and that's also where you're going to connect your zipper on the bottom of the cushion. Okay, so I like to give a little bit of room for when I do need to connect that zipper. So I'm going to start about 3 inches up the side. I've got the boxing piece on top of the piping with the edge of the boxing and the edge of the cushion cover matching. Okay, now be very careful to keep the edge at 1/2 inch. The better you become at that, the straighter the lines of your cushion are going to be. Oh, it wanted to catch on the back again. There we go. Okay, here we go. Again, we're sewing right sides together at a 1/2 inch. Again, the piping cord is going along the tunnel of the piping foot. And if you don't have a piping foot on your sewing machine, you can use your zipper foot or any narrow foot that lets you get as close to the edge of the piping as possible. For the first 2 years I worked for the upholstery shop, I did not have an industrial sewing machine. I used a regular sewing machine with the zipper foot for the piping. But I will say that using a piping foot is easier. Again, when we come to the corners, we're going to make a little trim in our boxing as we turn the corner to relieve that pressure and allow for a nice clean turn. And rotate. And again, line it up at 1/2 or 1/2 inch. Make sure your piping cord is in the groove of the piping foot and continue. Getting ready for our upcoming corner. Let's take a pause, trim our corner to relieve that pressure, and get ready to turn. We want to keep it all at 1/2 inch. That way, the entire boxing of the cushion is at 1/2 inch, and you don't have tiny corners or large corners, and everything looks even. So now I'm just finishing up sewing on the first side of the boxing at the 1/2 inch seam allowance. Again, I'm going to stop about 3 inches short from the end, and that's where we are going to connect the zipper on the next stage after we connect the other side of the cushion cover. Okay, so now we have our boxing attached to our cushion cover. And there is the piping seam. All right, so now I'm just going to take the top or the bottom cover, whichever one you want it to be, of the cushion cover. Again, this is the bottom part because that's where we joined our piping, and I want to match it to the cover that I just sewed the boxing onto. Now for this part, I would also recommend pinning your boxing onto the other side because you don't want your fabric slipping around on you, and you also want to make sure that your corners match. Now we are lucky today because we can see right along the line at the corner. So I want to make sure the corner of my top piece matches the corner of the bottom piece. So I'm going to go ahead and pin that now, and then we'll begin sewing the top piece onto the boxing. Okay, so now that we have our cover pinned into place to attach it to the top part of the boxing, I'm going to go ahead and begin sewing that. I'm going to leave some space because we're going to attach the zipper. We will do the zipper next after we attach this other piece of boxing. So again, I'm looking at my 1/2 inch seam allowance, putting down my presser foot, making sure my piping cord is in the groove of my presser foot, which is a special piping foot. Again, I use the Sailrite Fabricator, and I've been very happy with it. Here we go. Sometimes my back foot of my presser foot does get stuck, but it's an easy fix. Okay, here we go. So I'm attaching my top to my boxing. And then I'll turn it inside out so you can see what we have created. I want to make sure I'm sewing at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which is marked on my sewing machine. Okay, we're coming up to the corner, the all-important corner. We're going to do our little relief snip. And here we go. We're gonna round the turn just as we did before when we were putting the boxing on the first piece. Now you might find it difficult to get close to the corner, and that just takes some practice. Again, it's a little easier if you have a piping foot attachment on your sewing machine, but it is also possible with a zipper foot or a narrow foot. Okay, continuing on. We're still sewing the top onto the boxing. So we'll have, at the end of this, we'll have both sides of the boxing sewn on. Be careful not to run over your finger. My sewing machine came with a finger guard, but I did remove it because I like to live life on the edge. Thankfully, I have not sewn my finger, but I have had an upholstery staple go through just a corner of my finger, but it does not feel good. Okay, so I finished sewing that seam and I turned it right side out, and I think it looks like we're having a great product coming here. Next up is going to be the zipper. Now we will do the zipper. So I'm using a by the yard zipper, upholstery zipper, and it's size 5, and this is the pull. I'm going to separate the zipper at where I've cut it and put the pull on the zipper, just like this. And now the other side. Okay, there it goes. All right, then you'll remember we have our zipper piece, which we cut out after our boxing, and I had marked it at 3 inches, so I'm going to go ahead and cut these two pieces apart. So I have two 3-piece pieces, two 3-inch pieces, excuse me. Okay, now I'm going to change my thread length, or my stitch length, to 8 on my sewing machine, the Sailrite Fabricator, which is the longest stitch length on my machine. Placing right sides together, I'm going to sew at a 1/2 inch all the way down the length of the fabric for the zipper. Okay, so once we have that in place, that will be used as a placeholder for when we attach the zipper. Okay, so now, remember right sides are together. I'm going to flip it to the back of the zipper. I'm going to change my thread stitch length back to 3. I'm going to change my stitch length back to 3.5 for my zipper, and open up the seam. So this is the right side of the fabric, which I'm going to sew my zipper onto. Now I should be changing to a zipper foot on my machine, but I'm getting lazy, and I can sew with the piping foot still on if I do the outer edge. Okay, so you're going to want to pull the zipper head down, which will separate your zipper. Go ahead and pull it apart at the top. Turn your zipper over, and you're going to be using the left side first. So I'm going to put the teeth of the zipper at the center of the seam that we just made on our fabric. Okay, and then I'm going to put the needle into the zipper and the fabric. And most zippers will have a very faint line you can follow along right in the middle of the zipper, which will give you a straight line as you sew. All right, here we go. Again, some of my zippers get caught at the back foot of the piping attachment, so I was freeing it there. Okay, so here we go. You want to make sure you get the under edge of the fabric below, and sew in nice even stitches. There you can see we have gotten the under fabric. Otherwise there would be a hole in the zipper side, or a hole when you stretch out the zipper. Okay, continuing on. You want to make sure you keep the teeth of the zipper right in the center seam. Again, I'm doing okay here, so I'm going to keep going. Okay, when you near the end, go ahead and insert the needle into the fabric just a little bit. Lift up your presser foot and slide your slide on by, and finish out this side seam. Okay, now I'm going to go and do the other side. And there you can barely just see our stitches because our thread is white. Okay, so now I'm going to close this zipper. Be careful not to have it go off the edge. And I'm going to turn it around so I can use my same piping foot along this faint line. You can kind of see the center line I was talking about. It really helps to act as a guide as you're going along. Okay, so I'm going to put it under the presser foot. And begin sewing down the other side. Again, careful that I am catching the edge here, so there are no holes when I open up the zipper and stretch it out. Let's check that edge. Yes, so far we are okay. So we'll continue on. Again, when you are near the end, go ahead and push back on the zipper pull to tuck it up and underneath and get past your needle. And then you can lie this side of your zipper down and finish up your row of stitches. Okay, great. Okay, and now when you flip it to the right side, you see 2 parallel stitches going down the seam of the zipper. And now we will attach it to the boxing and finish the cushion cover. Okay, so look for the end of your zipper that it closes, because that you want to put with the excess fabric, because we're going to make a little bit of a tuck cover envelope for that. Okay, so take the other end, the end where the zipper does not close, and attach right sides together. This is on the end that matches evenly with the bottom of the zipper. And we are going to connect the boxing of the cushion cover with the zipper with right sides together. I'm going to do my seam allowance at 1/2 inch. Okay, continuing on, and when I get to my zipper, I'm going to back stitch a couple of times to make sure that that zipper is not going to come undone. It will serve as a zipper stop. So once I've attached the zipper to the boxing with right sides together, we can connect this to the cushion cover. So I'm going to turn it back to inside out. And again, I'm going to put my piping in the groove of the piping foot where I left off the 3 inches I left off before. Go ahead and put down the presser foot. And at the start of this stitch, I'm going to back stitch to make sure that seam does not come undone where I had left off previously. Here we're going to turn the corner. And here we go. Now we're starting to sew the zipper on. Okay, we are now attaching the zipper to the piping of the cover. Okay, continuing down the line of the boxing with the zipper, when you get close to the end it closes, give yourself about 2 inches to connect the little envelope cover that we're going to make to the end. Okay, so you'll see we had this excess fabric, which is going to create a little cover to hide the zipper pull at the end of the cushion. So So let's go ahead now and connect the extra 3 inches here to the end, the closing end of the zipper. And remember to back stitch over the zipper so it creates a stop when you pull on the zipper pull to close the zipper. Here we go over our zipper. I go over it a couple of extra times and then continue on with my seam. Oops. All right, so coming now around the corner. And I'm going to be careful to continue to sew along the piping line. Again, my piping foot is in the groove. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, and you can see where the zipper will tuck in right under there. And now is a good time to open up a little bit of that seam that we made to attach the zipper. Again, we had done this at the longest stitch length on our machine, so it should come apart nice and easily. And there's our zipper pull. We'll do the rest after we sew the other side. Okay, so now we will sew the other side, and then we will be done with our cushion cover. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video so far. Okay, and you want to make sure that your envelope cover comes straight across. Which it's a little bit difficult, but if you follow the line, that makes it easier. So our line is about right here, and it's going to come up about right there. So it's approximately 1 inch. Go ahead and hold that, and we'll begin our seam. Don't forget to backstitch, because this is one of our finishing seams, and we don't want the stitches to come undone. Again, we're going to carefully go around the corner, staying in the piping groove. I'm going to straighten out this side and continue stitching. And zippers do take a lot of practice, so don't be discouraged if it takes you 2 or 3 tries. Again, the back of my piping foot is getting caught on my fabric at the point where we attached the piping together onto the cover front. But we'll go on right through it once we loosen it up. And we're coming to our final corner now. Make sure it's lying down. We're at a 1/2 inch. And let's attach it. Making the final turn. Making sure everything is lined up for the final stitches. Here we go. And again, back stitch over the seam that you are meeting. Okay, and let's take a look. Okay, so now you can see that I have my zipper. I'm going to go around and trim all of my loose threads. And again, these are the threads from the temporary seam that we put in when we were installing the zipper. And I'll come back with the finished product on the cushion. And voila! Here we have our new cushion cover. It looks great. Again, here's the little pocket envelope where the zipper pull can hide. Very nice. Then our boxing. Again, our stripe is vertical. And I think it looks great. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this video.